If you're an artist like me, you've probably had a hard conversation with yourself about your career at one point or another. We all have to struggle with this fundamental truth. Our society does not reward you for making art, it rewards you for making money. If you're one of the lucky few who hits it big, sure, you'll make loads. But for the average Joe trying to pursue his passions, it's often at the expense of income. I've struggled with this myself. I went to art school. I thought I was going to make my passion for painting my career, but it didn't work out that way. Instead, I ended up using the design training and critical thinking skills I learned there to be creative in what ended up being my life's work, which is marketing, a field that was never on my radar screen. I'm grateful for my art school education. I use what I learned at CIA literally every single day. Like me, there are a ton of people, deeply creative and passionate people, who use their skills and abilities in their jobs and everyday lives, even if being an artist isn't their job. But what if you haven't benefited from the same kind of formal training? If you've never considered yourself creative or an artist? How can and why should you learn to use creativity to help you live a more fulfilling, authentic life? And what boundaries do you need to set to make time and space to explore your creativity and develop new passions? Today's guest is Jenn Alvin. After a year of chaos that upended her personal and professional life, she came to a realization that she needed to set boundaries to allow for things that bring her joy and healing, including art making, travel, and self-care. Jenn helps women find their inner artist and set the boundaries they need. She designed an adult activity book to engage and inspire, containing word puzzles, coloring pages, journal prompts, and many inspirational sticky notes. So hi, Jenn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for having me join you.
We've talked about saying no in service to the yes. We've talked about that recently with Mint Miller. And I literally just had a conversation with my youngest kid who just graduated from art school, and I'm an art school dropout. And so the question I get asked all the time is, you're so creative, you're such a great painter. When are you going to start painting again? When are you going to start doing some studio work? And the conversation I had was, when? I just don't have the time. And you need to carve out solitary time and quiet and an actual space to do the work. And that's, in my life right now, very hard to do. But I haven't set it as a priority right now. So I don't feel like I need to set those boundaries because we'll talk about this more, but I feel like I'm getting my creative needs met through my work. But you're right. You have to set a boundary in order to give yourself that space and time to nurture that part of yourself.
The other piece of that I think of, so I'm a multifaceted maker. I call myself a creative badass. If you want to build something, I'm your gal.
We'll have to talk about that later.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm the person that, like, there was a Christmas like years ago. My friend had seen something on Pinterest where it was a shop window model that had a Christmas tree as a skirt. It's like had a blouse on the top and there was like Christmas tree bottom. She's like, I want one of those. And we built it.
Wow.
And she wore it when she went caroling that year. And I love that sort of, thing. But I've learned about myself as a maker. It's like, I'm not a one person production house. I will build something like a Christmas tree skirt, or I made a whole bunch of, really cute leather koozies for myself and my friends. Like, oh my gosh, you should totally sell that on Etsy or go to the craft markets and things like that. And I have to set that boundary because I know myself well enough. I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do that. And there was also a bit of experimentation to see if that was something that I could do or wanted to do. But now I don't think people understand. It's never as simple as, oh, you just bring it to market. It's, there's a lot of work that's not the creative work that goes in there. So I've had to set the boundary of, nope, I'm probably not going to sell my artwork. I will do it because it's a labor of love. I tell my friends, it's like, if I make a baby quilt for, the child you've got coming on the way, I love you. I love you a lot because there's so much involved in doing, customizing a pattern to make a quilt.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to this later about boundaries
Sure.
and art and making and stuff. But
Mhm.
let's back up a little bit and talk about your year of chaos and how you're coming out of it, because it so interested me, because my whole year of no thing, which is the impetus for this podcast,
Mhm.
was a result of my year of chaos, actually a few
Okay.
years of chaos. And I know
Mhm.
that you were caretaking for someone with Alzheimer's and dementia. I had experience with that as well. I had a family emergency, a major like family kind of tragedy, and a whole lot of things. And then a lot of
Yeah.
business stuff, a lot of my just not setting boundaries that led to a bunch of problems. And so
Mhm.
it was that like feeling of exhaustion and burnout and frustration and feeling stuck that led to my year of no. And so it kind of sounds like you're kind of going through a similar transition where you went through all this stuff
Mhm.
and this year of chaos, and then you decided to learn from it and pivot and make some major changes in your life. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So the year of chaos, dementia, caring for my father, job, financial, the end of a relationship. It felt really overwhelming, and I got to a point where it's like, okay, I need to say no to a lot of things just to give myself the self-care that I need and I deserve. One nice upside about the pandemic is it's made me much more in tune of, oh, the world is a complete dumpster fire. I need to just kind of curl up and take care of myself. And if you'd asked me, like 5 or 6 years ago, I would say, nope, absolutely not. I don't have time for
Mm-hmm.
self-care. I was working for a very large company that had a very, go-getter sort of atmosphere. It's like you hustled all of the time. And I lost myself along the way,
Mm.
where it was just me, trying to be of service to my team, to the project. There was one project, this was early on in my career at this company. I kid you not, I was at the office for 20 hours straight.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I've done that too.
yeah,
Yeah.
software company, or at least I
I
was in the
like your phrase
software
of lose
division.
yourself. Like you do, those of us who are people pleasers
Mhm.
and makers and perfectionists, we will put in the 20-hour, 18-hour day
Mhm.
and lose ourselves. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that
That's
was,
rough.
yeah. And then that job, came to an end. I was excited. I finally got a meeting with my manager because he was impossible to get a hold of. And it's like, here, turn in your badge and your laptop. I'm like, what?
Oh wow.
It's like, come
Oh
on, really?
wow.
In hindsight, it actually turned out to be a really good thing. Outside of me, grieving the loss of, 10 years of my career where I was so invested. Like, I technically had a life outside of my job and my career, but sort of not really. I was always thinking about it in the back of my mind and learning those things about myself and really kind of recognizing that's where I was at. I am so, the other side of it now. There isn't a whole, after being there for a decade, losing that, and then going through the overall year of chaos, there isn't a whole lot that phases me anymore. I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I'm just going to breathe into this. And I am so good at my boundaries right now. It's like, yeah, no. My mom will call and she's like, hey, you want to do this thing? We want to travel here and do this thing. And I'm like, gosh, no, thank you. But send me a postcard.
Yeah. So how did you get there though? I mean, that initial work where you're like, I know when I started my year of no, I very
Hmm.
honestly say it, the idea was I would say no to one thing every day. It
Hmm.
wasn't until like May that I was really doing it. Like
Hmm.
because it was so hard. I would feel nauseous and sweaty and anxious and just I it was very hard for me to step back and say no, no, I don't need to do that, or it doesn't matter, whatever. What were the steps you took, or what were the initial feelings you had, or what was that process like for you to get to the point where you are now?
One of the upsides of having a year of chaos where there are multiple sources of things that cause stress is that you can take things, one at a time and say no to something one at a time.
Hmm.
So the job part, that actually was easy enough, that it took care of itself. It went away. And with the relationship, there was a lot of, okay, how do I, kind of sit down and get in touch with myself and with my feelings? I journal every day now. I didn't do that before the
Okay.
year of chaos. And every morning I go through and it's stream of consciousness. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's professional, sometimes it's writing, you've got this, 100 times,
Hmm.
kind of like, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, where he repeats that over and over again, or Bart Simpson writing on the chalkboard. It's like I will write something over and over. And at the end of it, it's like, what am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? What did I do yesterday that I'm really, really proud of? Like I have those journal prompts. It's like every single day. And going through that really helped me to kind of crystallize. It's like, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Where do I need comfort? I think it was about 6 months in, I went back and I read through my journal entries for the first 6 months so I could pull out themes. I'm like, oh, I have come a really, quite a ways. I decided that how do I put this? Um, it pretty much it was I got to see how much progress that I'd made because
Hmm.
sometimes you're just sitting
That's
in the middle
right.
of it. It's like, oh, did I make progress? Go back and read your journal. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I made progress. So I think that really was a key part of
Yeah.
my journey.
Yeah. I think that I'm a huge believer in collecting data. Like for my
Hmm.
business, I've been collecting
Good.
data since day one, so I can go back and figure out how to do the next thing, And
Hmm.
in terms of my year of no, I would jot it down when I did say no
Hmm.
in my planner. I would just make a note, and then I could flip back and see like the moments I felt nauseous kind of got less and less, and the
Yeah.
moments where I said I feel relieved there were more and more of them, and I realized, oh, I'm making progress here. I'm actually carving out time for the things that matter. So I think
Hmm.
that data collection, I'm not a journaler, but I keep wondering, like, should I do that? Is that a moment? For a while I had a gratitude journal, but then I kind of fell out of the habit. Do you do that manually, like in a notebook, or do you type it in, or like what? Do you have any tips? Do you do it on an app? Like what? How did you get into starting it?
My therapist suggested it.
Ah,
That's the short answer.
always good to
Uh,
follow their advice.
mhm. Yeah, I have an app that I use, and I like it because it crosses platforms. So I can use it on my iPad, I can use it on my laptop,
Oh,
I can
nice.
use it on my phone. I was out and about someplace, and I was just like all amped up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling all these feelings. I know, I'll journal about it. And so I pulled out my phone, and I'm like,
Nice.
and now I have a record of that
Yeah,
feeling. And
yeah.
then I went back and read it
In the
later. I'm like,
moment.
I am so glad that I wrote that down.
Right. Because those initial thoughts are hard to
Hmm.
remember sometimes. Yeah. The getting past the career change,
Hmm.
the layoff, whatever we want to call it.
Sure. Yeah.
You got to the other side, and now you realize, um, it was a good thing, but like, how did you come to the realization? Like, I know there's a grief period that happens, and there's
Hmm.
a letting go, and kind of feeling lost, and what do I do with my time, and kind of thing. Like, how did you come to the realization that this career change was the best thing for you? Like, what were the steps in your processing it, I guess?
There was actually a couple of, I tried a couple more bites at the apple, so to speak. It's like, okay, got laid off as a full-time employee. And then you have a 6 month waiting period before you can go back in any
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
form, or at least as a contractor. I got pulled back in as a contractor, and I did that for maybe 4 or 5 months. I'm like, oh, I'm really miserable. And I decided to say, no, it's like, all right, I need a break from this. And I took a
Mm-hmm.
break from that. I actually went and worked out at the coast, which was really fun, doing something completely different from what I normally do. It's like I will work hospitality and I will teach people how to catch Dungeness crab. And I did that for the season. It was kind of fun and amazing. And then I
Wow.
get pulled back into the same company again as a contractor. I'm like, okay. let's try it in a different division. With a large company, it's really easy to go into different places. I tried that again. I did that for maybe 6 months, and I'm like, this does not feel good. I'm feeling, the nausea and the pit in the bottom of my stomach. I don't like waking up in the morning. Okay, I've 3 times, it's like I was a full-time employee, went back for contract one, contract two. I don't want to do this again, ever again. That said, I have a really long track record with this company, and it's really attractive to people who, especially to recruiters, like, here, you have this company on your resume. You want to come back as a contractor. And I've gotten really, really, really good at saying no to
Yeah.
these recruiters, especially since the divisions that I want to be in, they are laying people off right and left. Like,
Mm-hmm.
some of the most talented people that I know have been laid off by this company.
Mm.
Like, do you really want to go back into that? No, I don't. That is my really hard no. It's like, all right, hey,
Yeah.
recruiters. Nope.
Yeah. I feel like there are a couple of concepts that are rolling around in my head as you're talking. I feel like
Mhm.
there's this concept of the fallacy of sunken costs, right? Where like I've spent all this time or money, I've invested in this place, this thing, this job, this career, right? I'm so many years into this and I only have so many years until retirement. Why would I quit now? I should try to just stick it out, right? But if you're miserable, you're miserable. Like,
Mhm.
right? And then I think what you said before about losing yourself, I think it's so easy for us to just kind of, it's like the frog in the pot of water that gradually starts to boil. Like you don't even realize you're losing yourself or that you've changed as a person or that you've become, you're not living your authentic life. So I feel like this abrupt change for you really made you kind of step back, and then like going back and forth between these things really helped you compare and contrast like how you were feeling.
It absolutely did. And as I started, ticking off, the things that were part of my year of chaos, it's like, okay, I've moved through this, I've moved through this, I moved through this. I'm never going to stop grieving some of these things,
Right.
but I'm acknowledging that it's like, okay, I can say no to, like the really intense grieving of my long-term relationship. It's because right now it's not serving me at all. It doesn't give me the opportunity to move forward. That is past. I can't do anything about it. I can't change anything about it. And spending time on that, just it overall, it hurts me. So I draw that boundary. I say, nope, not going to let my brain go in there. And it's opened my mind up to, it's like, oh, well, now that I'm not spending all my time, railing about this, relationship that I'm no longer in, it opens my time up. It opens my mind up. Something I've been thinking about, as I was thinking about this before we jumped or before we started this, me being good about setting boundaries for myself has really made me aware of, where other, like, being more perceptive to where people might be setting boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh,
Yes.
I think that you're setting a boundary here, but I'm not positive. And then I'll ask. That's the other thing that I'm getting really good at after, working through
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. It's like I ask a lot of questions. I ask for clarifying. I am a bit shameless sometimes, where it's like I would totally want to, you talked earlier about measuring things, especially with your business and with other things, and and I heard that I'm like, I want to just do a deep dive into those things and ask questions of you about that.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and I'm trying to
Sure.
be really. We'll talk shop later.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to talk shop with
Yeah.
as many people as I can, but I love the person that I am now after learning to say no to those boundaries. And one of the things that I love about myself is I'm able to perceive or have a
Mm-hmm.
better idea of when people are setting boundaries.
Yeah. And so a couple of thoughts there. So
Sure.
when I was first learning and teaching myself, and I'm still teaching myself, let's be honest, but how to set boundaries, I, I have sort of this network of women business owners that I deal with.
Hmm.
And I I started to really notice those in my network who were really good at setting boundaries, really good at saying no, or reframing things in a way that served them better. And
Mhm.
so I started using them as like a role model. So I'd be like, what would so and so do in this
Mhm.
situation? Like in my mind, just to kind of help me power through. I started to realize like no one else seems to have the same struggle I have in my
Mhm.
network. Why am I struggling? What's the worst that could happen? They're
Mhm.
doing it, you know. So that role model thing really helps. And I'm going to talk about the second thought I had, if I can remember it,
Mhm.
um, after we take a quick break. In the second half, we talked more about incorporating creativity into our chosen careers, and I finally did remember my second question. And we're back with Jenn. So the second thought, it did come back
Mhm.
to me, is when you are mindfully setting boundaries, making that part of your daily practice, part of that is learning to respect other people's boundaries, right? So you become more cognizant of it.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes we don't want to accept a boundary. You invite someone to go to do something and they're like, no, I'm not. Are you sure? Come on. It'll be fun. You know, like we have to be respectful of that. And so that's something that I've also had to learn, especially with like my adult children who have different, very points, different like patterns and lifestyle and schedules. And, you know, I've had to learn to honor those boundaries that they're setting.
Do you see your children setting boundaries?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just thinking when you said that, I'm like, okay,
They're
are
young
they
adults
actually setting,
now.
but they're young
Yeah.
adults now?
Yeah. They set boundaries. They definitely, you know, there are things about communication and scheduling and, um, yeah, they're good. And I see them doing it, you know, with their peers, which is good. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you believe that a lot of that stemmed from watching you go through
Oh
your
man, I
year
talk
of
about
no?
it all the time. All the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. And they'll even say, "Mom, I did this thing," you know, and you'll be proud of me, or this
Mhm.
happened, you know. So yeah, I think that's part of it. I'm annoying. I mean, I talk about this all the time with everybody.
Mhm.
So I preach, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, but it like that's part of it is you have to learn to respect others, right?
Mhm.
And you know, if someone doesn't want to do something, you have to figure out if it's something you really really need, then you know how do you
Mhm.
accommodate them. I think the person that I had the hardest time with it realize, and it took me a while to realize this, was my husband, because we're
Mhm.
so close. Like, you know, um I would ask him to do something or about something, and you know there'd be a no, and I'd be like, what do you mean
Mhm.
no? And then I had to be like, oh wait a minute.
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, I think we all have blind spots. I definitely had them for a while, and trying to be better about that. So,
Yeah.
um, so let's get back to
Sure.
not
Yeah, I
about
was saying
me,
I
not
derailed. I'm
about
like,
me,
I'm going
enough
to
about
interview
me.
you, but it's so much fun. This is my tendency sometimes
Yeah,
where I like to interview people as much as they're interviewing me.
yeah,
This is what I do.
yeah. Well, that's not why we're here, though. So,
Yeah,
so back
that's
to you.
true.
Um,
Back to me. Okay.
so we recently had Anthony Quo on. We talked about making career changes,
Hmm.
and I'd be really interested to hear your points of view about your life now as an artist, an entrepreneur versus an employee. Like, what are the pros and cons? What are the things you're doing now? How does that allow you more time to be a creative person? All those things.
Gosh. I think I may have mentioned briefly before the break about, pits in the bottom of your stomach. And every time I look at job postings, because when I was at this company, it's like, I'm making six figures. That's brilliant. And I'll look at job postings, which arguably would probably pay the six figures that would be great to live the life that I'm accustomed to. And I get this pit in the bottom of my stomach. I'm like, I just don't want to do this at all. This is, I'm going to be really constrained by all the things. I'm not going to have an opportunity, or I can't assume, but there's a good chance that I wouldn't have the opportunity to kind of make my own decisions and make my own way. And being an entrepreneur, it's both good and bad. It's like, great, my own boss. And then, oh, shoot, I'm my own boss. This is
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah, but
Yep.
I like the feeling that I can create things. There's a quote, you can't see this, it's off camera, but I have like a million sticky notes on my wall over here because I write sticky notes like almost every day, just as kind of like, what's my intention or what's something cute and funny I found. And one of them is, the great thing about being an engineer is that if there's something that you want and it doesn't exist yet, you can create it. And I think about that also as an artist, in that doesn't exist, I will create it.
So tell me about what you're doing now. Like what are the different kinds of jobs and what are the different kinds of creative projects you're doing? Like just tell me like what's your life like now?
I love my life right now. I was thinking about that a little bit over the weekend. So I have a weekly dog walking, thing. So I don't spend all of my time, like sitting here and focused, on the computer. That's kind of like my little thing. I accepted a role as okay, so also working on the book. I finally got, everything done.
We'll talk about
So
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about that later anyway.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but, being an artist doing, working on the book, but my air quotes day job right now is I am a freelance tour guide here in Portland, Oregon. Well, actually, we start in Portland, and I am taking people up the Columbia River Gorge, which is gorgeous. If anyone's ever played the Oregon Trail game, like a
Oh,
lot of
my
us
kids played that.
of a certain age, right? If you're of a certain age, you had to play that all the time.
Yeah.
And I tell the guests on my tour, I'm like, hey, remember that game? We're, driving up the final leg of the Oregon Trail where you have to take the raft down the river.
Oh, fun.
And I'm like, I still would not take, people go out there and they kite surf, and I'm like, y'all are nuts. I did not do that. And I take people through Oregon wine country, which is a lot of fun. It's people are really, just they're happy in that. Oh, I also take people out to the Oregon coast. When I wrote the resume and cover letter for this job, because I'm a freelancer, I'm 1099. I wrote in, like about my volunteer work, about just like some hospitality things that I'm doing, and my tech career was one bullet point,
Mhm.
which like I haven't written a resume like that. But when I wrote the cover letter, it's like I want to spend my time with people who actually want to spend time together. And I think
Nice.
that could, carry through just about everything that I'm doing right now. It's like what sparks joy? I don't need to be a six-figure corporate drone anymore in order to have joy in my life. And so
Mhm.
I'm enjoying the hell out of this.
You get to be with people on one of the most fun days of their lives.
Hmm.
Like that what a what a blessing. That's just so great.
Yeah. I went to a networking event last week and people were like, oh, what are you up to? You usually do the usual, the schmooze. And I tell people what I'm up to. They're like, that sounds so cool. I'm like, right?
Yeah.
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 I feel really brave to be doing this.
Yeah.
But I also like talking to other people. It's like, how do you set boundaries? It's like, do you actually want to go back into that type of corporate career, or do you want to
Mhm.
lean into some creativity? There's another person who also was a casualty of the layoffs at this company. She's still technically looking for corporate work, but she also kind of set the boundary of um, that doesn't need to be my career. Like
Mhm.
she's also turning away the recruiters who want her to go back to that company.
Mhm.
She's doing furniture refinishing, which I think is just one of the most badass things. And so
It's
she's
it's
doing
the thing
storytelling
I'm
on that.
addicted to on YouTube. These furniture
Yeah.
flippers, there are so
Hmm.
many of them, and it's a real thriving career these days. It's
Yeah.
lovely. I
Yeah.
secretly think if my business fails, that's what I'm going to do.
I have such mad respect for a lot of the people that I know who, yes, they might still technically be looking for, traditional corporate jobs, but for them to say, no, I need some time to kind of lean into, me being, happy and just finding things that spark joy. There was another person that I follow on LinkedIn. I love that when people share these stories on LinkedIn. She's like, okay, I want to be a barista. So I had this great job when I was in high school being a barista. She's like, all right, I'm going to say no to job hunting full time, and I'm going to give myself, 10 to 20 hours a week to work as a barista. And she said it's bringing joy to her life. My furniture, finishing friend, the, barista. I love that there's a generation of people who are saying no to traditional corporate things so that they can lean into stuff that brings them joy.
Right. And so in your case, because you've just opted not to go back into one of these very attainable, high powered, time consuming
Yeah.
jobs that you would,
Hmm.
a lot of people might naturally jump right back into, you
Hmm.
said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this freelance work to help pay the bills. And that's going to give me time to be creative and do this other thing. So tell us about that. Tell us about the coloring book thing.
So as I started out the year of chaos, or at least as I didn't start it by choice. It's just sort of it happened to
That's
me.
what happens in life. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm learning more and more. I'm like, oh, okay. Uh, I I've got a ton of self-help books. Like the other thing that, if it's audio, they won't see it, but or if they might see it. Anyway, I've got a whole bunch of self-help books over here. I've done a lot of things. I'm like, none of this fits my needs as an artist.
Mm,
I've seen
hmm.
some books where it's like, here, do cute coloring things, uh, or like there's really serious journaling. And which I wrote the book that I wanted to have. So what I've done is I've designed a whole bit. I learned how to do crossword puzzles, like actually to design
Oh,
crossword puzzles.
fun.
Yeah, and I wound up setting it or like laying it out in almost like a hero's journey. It's like, okay, here, this is what I want. This is, what I'm thinking about. What's in my way? Like one of the pages that I designed for this book, as part of my healing, was a color by numbers of a really dark, scary forest. And every single color on the color by numbers is it's black, it's gray, it's charcoal. So if you are following if you're following the directions, then, you could do everything, and make it black and dark and gray. But let's say that you want to approach it differently. It's like you can take that instead of doing all the grays, you can make them, all colorful. There's options there. And I
Hmm.
love that I built out this blend of, word searches and crossword puzzles and coloring things and also some drawing prompts.
Do you feel that working on this book and just being creative in general, just using that maker muscle and just
Hmm.
making things, did that help heal you, you think, through this journey?
I definitely, I believe that it did. It really kind of forced me to kind of sit and think about it. And it also gave me an opportunity to reach out to other women. And it's like I pitched, the idea to a couple of friends. One of my friends is writing like books right and left, and she did a master class on writing books. And I was gonna write something about my technical expertise, and then like flash of lightning, I sent her a note at like 2 a.m. Like, no, 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 I want to write a book about uh, pretty much I wanted to write a book that if your girlfriend is having problems in their lives, it's like here's a book that you can use. Some of it's going to be kind of fun and frivolous where you're doing word searches,
Mm-hmm.
but other parts it's like here I'm encouraging you to draw out your feelings or to just kind of think about where you want to go
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
also celebrating your wins.
Mm-hmm.
You have made it through so much because you get to when you're of an age it's like okay, most of us have gone through, it's like relationships or loss of jobs. There's always going to be a transition. And I loved designing this book because I wanted people to recognize you're going through a lot of transitions. And
Mm-hmm.
it helped me to try to, how do I say this? as I was, kind of organizing how the book should be, I'm like, oh, okay, thinking about where I've been in my journey. It's like, okay, what is it, the stages of grief, which I've heard is a fallacy. It doesn't actually exist. That's another podcast I would listen to. But just, it really helped me to organize my thoughts and approach things more thoughtfully.
It's really fascinating to me. My mind's kind of swirling as you're talking, thinking
And I could
about.
talk about this for hours.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'm not really a journaler, but maybe a book like that could be helpful. I know people
Yeah.
who use the mandala coloring books when they're very
Mhm.
stressed, and I'm wondering if like something like this would be a nice tool to kind of. I think people give up on the mandala coloring books because it gets boring
Mhm.
after a while, you know?
Yep.
Like how many pages are you really going to color?
Yeah. Yeah. That was the other impetus behind this.
Yeah.
It's like coloring books are boring, especially the mandalas.
I mean, the
There are
ones with
so
the
many of
swear
them out
words in
there.
them are hilarious and fun. I don't know if you've seen those.
Oh yeah, I've got
Yeah,
one on
those are
my
super
on my
fun.
fridge. My
But
sister
yeah,
gave me a whole bunch.
there's only so many pages you can do.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of circling back to what I started to talk about before, in
Sure.
that, people ask me all the time, when are you going to start painting again? When are you going to,
Hmm.
and I say, when am I going to do that thing? But what I find is, and my kid and I were just having this conversation in the car yesterday, like when I'm building a website or I'm really writing very creative copy for something and I know it's going to do the trick, or I talk to a client and I see the leads that my work generated. Like, I feel like I'm using those same creative tools I learned in art school. I am making, right? I'm just using a different tool set. And so I feel like even if you're not a visually creative person, if you've never done art before, there are other ways to be a maker, to do things, to create things that can help in the healing process, whether it's gardening or I don't know what, cooking, or even if it's a digital thing or it's a video
Hmm.
series on YouTube or something.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like any way you could somehow have that quiet time to make something,
Right.
regardless of what it is, even if you're not a visual artist, it can be part of that healing journey. And to do that, you need to set boundaries so you have time to do it.
Yeah, there's that. So just thinking about what you said and what you were asking about, one of my intentions with this book was to make it accessible. I mean, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
really creative person. I believe and think of myself as a creative person. Not everyone does. I'll
Right.
talk to people, they're like, oh, you're so creative, I can never do that. I'm like, no, 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 yes, you can. And it's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to explain that to them. But I wanted the book to be accessible to people, even if they didn't consider themselves to be artists. And I
Mm-hmm.
also wanted it to be something where they could pick it up and put it down again. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
someday they're feeling like doing puzzles. The other day, it's like, I want to color.
Right.
You
Right.
know, they may take a Sharpie and make something completely black. There's a couple of dark pages in there where they probably
Yeah.
could paint the
Yeah.
whole thing black.
Yeah. Did you ever, we talked to a lot of people um, who have these major changes and then they start doing something new and
Hmm.
they struggle with imposter syndrome, quote unquote.
Hmm.
Do you ever struggle with that? Was there ever a time where you're like, why am I doing this? Who's going to use this book? Like, did you ever struggle with anything like that?
I have struggled with that. Maybe not the imposter syndrome. Oh, okay, because creating a book is multifaceted. There's so much involved with it. I spend like probably more time than I can count on looking at YouTube videos on how to do some of the InDesign and Illustrator things. I've been an Adobe girl for decades, and I love this because it's given me an opportunity to kind of pick up and dust off skills that I haven't used in a while. But as far as imposter syndrome, where I keep getting stuck is the marketing of the book. I technically have an email newsletter. It's like, what do I write in there? Uh, there was the first email newsletter that I sent out, two people unsubscribed. I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't like me anymore because it's like I
No, it's
felt,
just people get too many emails. That's all it is. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
you.
that's kind of, yeah, I figured it out,
Yeah.
later, and I need to become less emotionally attached to some of this, but the imposter syndrome. for me is actually reaching out and talking to people, like trying to promote the book, trying to even talk about it on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I feel kind of an imposter syndrome there. It's like, why would anyone, bother to read my book? It's like, oh, well, Jenn's just, venting about her life. Is that valuable to me? So I've had to, you know, see what I can do about the imposter syndrome, but also figure out a way to pitch it to people in that it's not just Jenn ranting about her year, it's her sharing what she's learned. Well, actually, a little bit about what I've learned, but also it's like what information did I need to write down in order to help me work through all of the things that happened to me.
Well, it sounds like you've acknowledged it, but you've powered through anyway.
It's a daily struggle. One of the things that I do love about the intro to That's a Hard No, it's it may sound like I'm an expert at setting boundaries, and really it's like, okay, it's something that you have to decide to go after every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's humility, right? If you just
Mm-hmm.
approach things with humility and curiosity and be like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm just trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it opens up a lot of conversations so that
Mm-hmm.
you have the opportunity to learn more. So,
Yeah. I'm doing my best not to shame myself on anything, like being, mad at myself. It's like, oh, well, you said that you were going to finish, these chapters by the end of the weekend. The wonderful Douglas Adams. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they
that's
make
my
as they go by.
favorite quote. I use that all the time. That's so funny. Oh my God, you and I have to talk offline. That
Oh,
is
yeah,
like
absolutely. We will
literally,
talk
I use
hitchhikers.
that all the time. So funny. That's the
Yeah,
best
I'm just like,
quote.
I'm huge
I
hitchhikers.
love the
Yeah.
whooshing sound as they fly by. Yeah,
Yeah. But
that's
it's like it's
great.
giving myself grace. It's making things. I need to be nice to myself. Because there's a lot going on. You know,
Yeah.
we
We
were
receive a
going
lot of
someplace with this, and
negativity already. We don't need to generate it internally. It's like
right.
if anybody's going to love you, it's got to be you. Right.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where
And
it all
if you
starts.
beat yourself up over it, you're not going to be a stronger person. You're just going to wind up, bruised. I'm like, I need to
Yeah.
remember that.
That's a
It's
good
like,
one. I like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
tell our listeners how they can find you and learn more about this book and keep an eye out for it.
Sure. So they can go to strongerwiserfabulous.com, which has a lot of
I like
background.
it.
Yeah, so strongerwiserfabulous.com, that has the information about the book. It's actually going to be available to purchase. It's like finally everything's ready to go. You can go in, you can order your copy of the book. Um, then you can also reach out to me on Jenn Likes to Make Things, which has kind of a history of a lot of the creative stuff that I've done. I'm most active on Instagram, so you can go to Stronger, Wiser, Fabulous. Jenn Likes to Make Things, and then I also have where I've started talking more about my adventures as a person who travels and a tour guide. Jenn likes to go places.
Oh, fun.
So it's
I
like
like
Jenn
all
likes
your
to do this. Jenn likes to do that.
That's great. That's great. I love it. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation, and it's fun to talk
Yeah.
to another creative type
Mhm.
person and who's been on a somewhat similar journey. So I really appreciate all your insights and your vulnerability, sharing with everybody your story, and
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to seeing this book.
Excellent. Heather, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. This has been so much fun.
Oh, good. That's a Hard No is a production of Clever Girl Marketing, my little agency in Cleveland, in partnership with our friends at Evergreen Podcasts. Many thanks to our amazing team, including Maura Del Rosario, our production and marketing coordinator, Noah Fouts, our amazing producer, editor, and composer who wrote our theme music and performed it with his band, The Big Leagues, and our new video producer and editor, Kay Holmberg. You can find show notes and resources on our website, and you can find other fun stuff on our socials. We're Hard No Podcast. Find your no, then say it with me.